back to Find Your Whys. How are you doing today, Indira?
I'm doing fantastic. The weather is getting beautiful.
Here
Having a
too.
good time. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. So, I am Yvonne. I'm a financial coach.
I'm Indira. I'm your leadership coach.
Yeah, today we are talking about a topic that every single person on the planet faces, and it's change.
Yeah.
And whether it's a new job, a breakup, a move, health crisis, something, or even just you're coming into a new season in life, change is inevitable. But it's how we handle it that's kind of up to us. So today we're going to be giving some ideas on how you can stop flailing through it and fighting it and maybe flow with the change a little bit. Because while change is really uncomfortable, it can be an incredible doorway to growth and clarity and even maybe a new source of joy.
Yes, that is so true. And I wanted to start with a little personal story. And I have mentioned a few times in the podcast. A few years ago, I decided to move to Canada. And at that moment, I left my country, my family, my friends, a great job that I loved, and certain financial stability that I have already built by that time. Yes. And I left all that just for a possibility in a dream. Because by that time, I have never visited Canada, which it was kind of crazy as well. So those initial years were fulfilled with a lot of uncertainty and emotional distress, and also financially, that for sure. But it also was very exciting because I was getting to get to know new people, new culture, and the possibility of building a new life was very important for me. And that opportunity really gave me guidance. Looking back to that, I thought that was really a gift. It was a great gift because it helped me to rebuild my persona, both
Yes.
as a woman, as a mother, get to know you, being in this podcast. So I just wanted to mention this because sometimes we are so strict and hold on into that version of ourselves
Mm-hmm.
and not to grow. And that's something that change only by changing the state where we are is that really going to help us to do that.
Mm-hmm. Good points. Moving is difficult and scary. I've
You know
done
about that.
it numerous times. Yes. And I
Yeah.
will definitely be talking about that too.
Yeah.
But the truth is that change is really hard because it threatens our sense of safety in a lot of ways. Our brains are wired for familiarity and predictability. It gives us a sense of control. And when you're doing something like, moving to another country, you kind of feel like you don't have any control. You don't know what to expect. So when that's disrupted, like a move, a job loss, divorce, something like that, our survival brain kicks in. And it thinks that we're in danger and it wants us to retreat, the whole danger, Will Robinson thing. But, it happens even if it's a positive change, like getting married or having a baby, or like us starting our own businesses. It can cause a lot of stress because anything unknown to us, it triggers that fear response.
That is so true because our amygdala perceives unfamiliarity as a threat. And unless we become conscious of that, is that when we can see that reaction and really that not allow that to sabotage our growth. But when we hold into that, and we tend to hold into things that doesn't serve us any longer just because we don't want to make that change. So by resisting to change, it's not that you're broken. It's normal. In reality,
Yes.
that's a biological response to a risk because we're questioning. But when we start questioning, that reaction is that when we really start growing. So sometimes we have to ask ourselves, what am I really afraid of? Or what am I losing that it makes me resist to this change? And that start triggering that questioning in your brain and understanding what's happening and understand that transition.
Yeah, I love that you said that it's a biological response because it's true. And a lot of people think that something's wrong with them if they feel that fear with change, but it's not. And I love that. I love that you said that, and it's true that not all types of change are the same. There's expected and unexpected change. And, is it something that you chose or did it just come out of the blue and hit you like a curveball? And those, we think that is the biggest type of fear that we get with change, but it's not. There's also internal and external fear. Is it something within yourself that you're wrestling with or trying to change or shift, or did something around you change? And until we started looking into this topic, I had no idea that it was so specific and so varied. We always think change is something that happens against our will, but it's not. There's gradual and sudden change. Did you see something coming for months? Like for myself, I'm divorced, and it was a gradual change, but it was still a very big change. I saw it coming for, probably years more than months. It wasn't something that happened overnight, like a very sudden change. But if you can name it and realize what kind of change it is, it's the start of gaining clarity. And when you get clear on something, it can give you a little bit of sense of control back. And I think that's really important when you're in the middle of change, even if it's a good change.
Oh, and so glad that you mentioned that, because especially when you're talking about the divorce portion, because it takes for years for you, not just the process of making that decision, but once you do that, to start that transition of new you. And it's something that is really painful in reality. And it's important to mention that change is like an emotional roller coaster.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Sometimes you have, there's different stages like denial, frustration, confusion, exploration, the moment of decision, and also just when you made the decision, for example, the divorce, that you made the decision, you start exploring, and that commitment that you said, this is the step that I'm going to take, and I'm willing to do, and I'm committing to that step. So in reality, it mirrors the stages of grief.
I was just going to say that. Yes.
In many ways, it's that. It's you losing something, and we lose that sense of control and sense of known things that we know. But it's that in between that process that it gets messy. And it's that when really the transformation happens. It's like the caterpillar for the butterfly. And the transformation happens then, and that's when reality you're becoming.
I love that. I really do. I mean, I've heard the caterpillar into the butterfly thing, but I love that you said that it's like grief, because there is so much emotion. And like I keep going back to, even if it's a good change, there's so much emotion that goes into it, but like I said, there's good. And so one of the good things is that change is uncomfortable. We know that, but you can also use it like a portal, I guess you could say, because it's going to force you to reevaluate everything that matters to you. And even if it's against your will, and it's going to kind of just peel away all the things that aren't working for you. And it shows you what you've outgrown. And then it kind of gives you permission to reinvent yourself, like you were talking about when you moved. And I have a similar story. I didn't move to another, felt like another country, because I was moving after my divorce. I moved from the northernmost part of North Dakota, near the Canadian border, to southern Texas. So it definitely felt like another country. It was amazing, though. Best thing I ever did, and it really was a great opportunity for me, because I was shifting from what it meant to have years prior been a wife and a mother. And I moved when my youngest child moved away. So I wouldn't say I was reinventing myself, but I was just kind of finding myself as Yvonne, and not as somebody's wife or somebody's active daily mother anymore. So it was a really good change. It was scary. It was exhilarating and terrifying and everything. I moved to a place where I didn't know anybody. So it was pretty cool. But something else that I learned through all this is there is a term, it's called liminal space. Had no idea what it was until we started looking into this topic. And it's the space that's in between what was and what's next. And it's like, if you picture it if you have a house, a hallway, and there's doors on every side, it's like you're in that hallway. And while it can feel really confusing, sometimes empty and lonely, it's actually like a really sacred place, because it's when you have an opportunity to become very real. And if you think about it in terms of growth, it doesn't happen up on the mountaintop. Okay, it happens during the climb. It's while you're still in the valley, in the middle of it. And you need to learn to be okay if that's where you're at. I loved that.
I love that. I love many things of what you said. One of them is that transition of finding yourself as Yvonne. And we are so engraved on what we do and not necessarily who we are. And we are always looking from the outside and not on the inside. And that was profound, because sometimes And that was a change that you knew was going to happen at some
Yes.
moment. Your kids will move away. But in fact, not every woman and every person is prepared for that moment.
No.
And we know it's going to happen. And when it happens, it's like empty nest. And now you have
Mhm.
to go back to who I really was.
Right.
And
And I was not the same person
time.
that I was prior.
Exactly.
I
It's
had to figure out
time.
who I was now.
Oh my gosh, that's profound. And that's part of change. And that's a change
It
that
is.
it's going to happen. And one important thing that I would like to mention, and is that embracing change, it's something that it's important because it
Mhm.
instead of we making it, because we just mentioned it's going to happen anyways.
It is.
So we should make it our ally. But because sometimes we resist it and instead of being curious. So, and I can say, for example, in your transition, and even as a leader, as a parent, you have to understand in that process of embracing change to preserve your energy and to model that energy for yourself, for your kids, for your team. In my case, when I was
Mhm.
moving from Canada, I was always aware of how I was facing that change because my kids were watching me.
Oh yeah.
And I have to, how is that, model to them that process of change
Mhm.
and be calm and adaptable, even when all that craziness was happening outside. And that provides to them psychological safety. And I can tell
Yeah.
you, for example, my youngest one, he used to be very independent when we were in Dominican.
Mhm.
But when we moved to Canada, he hold on to me that he wanted to always be carried or put it
Mhm.
in. He didn't even want to walk. And the way that he was facing that change is that, hey, you changed everything to me and you brought me to this something completely new, and I don't know how to manage it. So I was always trying to be protecting to him and his brother as well, to be able to create an environment of safety for him. And
So he
that
was
one of the
literally clinging on to his safe space.
Oh,
That's so
yes.
precious.
Yes. And that's important that, for example, when we model and change, that we provide that safety space for the people that we are around us. Because that is how you can show that. In order to do that, you have to be transparent. You have to
Mm.
communicate the change and the things that are changing and the reason why they're changing. And some of them you have to say what is not changing. I was able to have that conversation with my older one because he was 7, but the older one was 3-year old, so he wasn't
Oh wow.
understanding what's happening. So it is important that we model that and we embrace that change when we do through this transition.
I hadn't thought about that, about how you're modeling behavior, not just to your family, but like you were saying, even at work, especially in a leadership position. And that's the same thing. A lot of people, especially right now, so many people are going through job changes. Corporations are changing like crazy. And so it is something that's going to be inevitable for a lot of people. So it is going to be imperative for leadership to be, like you said, transparent and to really model great behavior through all of it. So I love it.
Yeah,
Love it. Love
it,
it.
it's hard, like you said, because now people are going back to work after
Mhm.
COVID, and then it was so all that transition creates uncertainty for the team because they already people, for example, when I was in Canada, they moved from the city to the rural areas.
Yes.
And now the company is saying you have to go back to
Go
work.
back.
So all that transition is crazy sometimes. Some people are
It is.
deciding, I'm not going back. I have to look for other opportunities.
Yep. Oh,
So
so much change.
yes.
And through all this change, we've talked about how important it is to embrace it, things like that. But it's going to be really easy to get into a few pitfalls and some traps that you can avoid because of
Yes.
our resistance to wanting to change.
Yeah.
One, it is something that I need to continue to work on it through myself. It's toxic resilience. And what that means is that you're pretending everything's okay when it's not.
Oh yeah.
And, we have to understand that although you don't need to fall apart, it's okay to not be okay. And you can work through that.
Yeah.
And too many of us are always just, when you see somebody, what's the first thing you ask? Hi, how are you? What's our immediate response? I'm fine.
Good. Yeah.
And I'm not saying that, go around telling everybody, oh, my life story and this is terrible and everything else, but that becomes a persona for us. And we're like, everything's fine. It's okay. It's that meme of that dog that's, in an office and everything's on fire. It's okay. I'm fine. Everything's fine. We do that to ourselves a lot. And another thing, and I have done this also, I think I'm guilty of all of these, and it's rushing through the discomfort. You're trying to fix it fast and get through it, get over it, because it's painful. It doesn't feel good or it's uncomfortable, but we hurry through it instead of allowing ourselves to feel things and process what's happening and then learn from it.
Yeah,
exactly. And another one, and we've talked about this numerous times on here, is comparison. Yes. And comparison is truly the thief of joy. Your journey is your own journey. Nobody else is living your life, even if they seems like they are living a similar life to you. You cannot measure your progress of anything that you're going through against somebody else's highlight reel like they do on social media. Social media is a liar. We've said this. And it's not just social media, but our world lives so much on social media.
Yeah.
Even in our neighborhoods, a neighborhood is a neighborhood. We all look like we're living very similar lives. And a lot of times we compare ourselves to our neighbors. It used to be called keeping up with the Joneses. Yep. But it's not even just in material things. I have some neighbors that are a wonderful family. They have kids and everything just seems fantastic. They're always outside together, working in the yard, all this kind of stuff. And then one night I got a ring alert on my phone from my Ring camera. And I looked at it, was 1:15 in the morning, and one of the neighbors' preteen boys was sneaking out of the house and running across my yard. And I thought, oh, it's not so perfect. He's not so perfect. The family's not so perfect. And it kind of, I wouldn't say felt good, because obviously they're going to have other things to deal with. But, when you start to compare yourself to everybody else's perfect life, that is going to steal your joy. It really is.
Yes. In my country, there's a saying, I would try to translate. Only the knives understand the heart of the pumpkin, because that's the one that goes inside. I don't know if there's an expression like that in English.
I don't think so, but it's interesting. Explain it to me.
Yeah, because the thing is that we just analyze based on what we see from the outside. But only that person understands that they're going through. Only that person understands their pain, their struggle. So that's impossible, the comparison, because you never can relate to the life that they're living and what they pass through to get to that position. So that's, I like that. The understanding part.
It sounded funny at first in English, not going to lie. But it really is profound. It makes so much sense.
Yeah.
And one other pitfall that we can fall into, and I'm really glad that actually this one didn't happen to me when I moved, and that's over-identifying with our past. And I think it's really easy, especially as mothers, to do that when we become empty nesters. So you were one person before, that doesn't mean you have to stay there, especially if it's a bad place. Or if it's a good place, sometimes you have to let go of that. Like I had to let go of the role of being an active mom all the time in order to become who I was meant to be and who I'm still evolving into. But you also, I'm sure, have heard the saying that you don't judge a person by their past. Mm-hmm. And we're really good at saying that, but you also don't need to convict yourself of your own past and then stay there either, especially if it's been a bad past. You have the permission to give yourself to change, whether it's, from a bad position or just into something new.
Or by experience. Yeah, that's very profound. Because, and I can relate to all of those ones that you have mentioned. The tax resilient, the comparison as well, and also rushing from the discomfort. Yeah.
Yes.
And I think in order for us to help navigate change and also working through those traps, it is important, at least I consider 3 pillars. One of them is our mindset. The other one is our habits, and the other one is our support system. And we have talked about this one in numerous occasions of HFM. So in terms of mindset, like we were talking before, maybe instead of being trying to control everything, if we focus on curiosity, that will give us a different perspective. Because instead of asking, why is this happening to me? You can ask yourself, what am I learning from this? And when I moved from Canada to the United States, that was something that I was not planned. It happened. It came to me 2 times. And the second time I said, God, if you put it on my plate, maybe you want me there.
Right.
But I always consistently ask him, what am I here? What are you teaching me with this experience? And there's a lot of learning that I'm getting, but because I'm being in that transition of learning, especially because it was something that I was not planned, it just happened, which is not the normal way that changes happen in my life. I'm more
Yeah.
intentional. So the other thing is that the language, our inner conversation, oh my God, that is so important, because instead of we seeing ourselves as the victim, we are in discovering ourselves. That will
Yes.
give it a completely different perspective. And that was something that you were mentioned about moving and being an empty nester and finding yourself. That inner conversation is important because you're in process of discovering who you are right now,
Mm-hmm.
to being a mother and now as a mom.
Yeah.
And the other one, for example, will stay present. Yes, we wanted to have everything mapped out, but now you cannot figure it out everything. It's going to take a time and take one step at a time. And
Mm-hmm.
all those things, in order to support your mindset, you need to have the right habits. For example, you can journal, you can create a routine that help you to support those habits. And the other things that we mentioned maybe in every podcast is that take small steps and
Yes.
track your tiny wins because you have to
Mhm.
acknowledge when you're courageous. Even getting out of the bed sometimes is hard. Now that I'm
Mhm.
switching my gym from evening to the morning, oh my God, it's a battle every morning.
I
So I
bet.
told my coach, I'm going to text you every morning. So he say, okay, I'm fine. He say, I'm wake up, I'm at the gym, I'm getting ready at 4:30. I say at 5, I'm testing you. And yesterday was Friday, right? Yeah. Yesterday, oh, Monday. Yesterday I told him, hey, it's hard today, but I have to do it.
Yep.
So what I'm telling you with this is the support system. Why is
Mhm.
that? He is my support system in this new change that I'm
Yeah.
doing, and I'm having someone that I'm accountable for. It has to be so. That's important because it helps you to become the person that you really want, but you don't feel alone. And also, it's okay to ask for help. That's why your
Yes.
support system is so important. So those are tiny things that you can do in order to avoid those traps and also to navigate those changes processes.
Yeah. I can't think of one person on the planet that has ever been successful alone. And I mean, even like us, being entrepreneurs, we have our
Yeah.
own business. We are solopreneurs, but we did not get there on our own. I mean,
Yes.
we are accountability partners. We have taken courses. We have done all kinds of things
Yeah.
that we needed that support. We
Yeah.
needed that support. So I love that. That's something I don't think a lot of people think about when they're going through change. I mean, we
Yeah.
rely on friends and stuff like that, but sometimes you actually need, like you and
Get out.
professional support, whether that's therapy or a coach or something.
Yeah.
So I like that. I like that a lot. We've talked about all kinds of change, and there's a lot that I think a lot of people can identify with. And the main one, though, is I think one of the hardest changes that we can go through is when your role changes. Like when it can either be like, well, for me, I went from being married to divorced, but at one point, I also went from being single to married.
Yeah.
So that's a huge change. That's why a lot of people do premarital counseling, things like that. Something else a lot of us women have faced, and some men, I actually know a few men that went from being a working professional to being a stay-at-home parent, or vice versa. When
Yeah.
you are, for
Yeah.
myself, I was a stay-at-home mom for a long time before my divorce, and then I went to being from a stay-at-home mom to a working professional.
And that's scary. That's scary.
Incredibly scary.
Yes,
There's so
because
many things you have to consider that I didn't have to worry about when I was a stay-at-home mom.
yep.
Who's gonna take care of the kids and just everything. The financial part.
And vice versa, the financial part when you're
Yes.
working and then you go just to stay home more it is,
Yes.
yeah.
And that's something that one of my particular niches of my clientele is people that decide to do that, and how are they going to live on one income and stuff. But and that's kind of goes into being either employed to unemployed or being employed to being an entrepreneur.
Oh, yeah.
And this isn't my first rodeo with being an entrepreneur. I was a realtor for a long time, which is also entrepreneurship. But it is very scary when you don't have steady income, or as much as people are like, oh, if you work hard enough, you're going to make it. That's not always the case. So it is a big change in your life to go from that sort of stability, and even the stability of 9 to 5, or well, nobody works 9 to 5 anymore, but 8 to 5. And when you're an entrepreneur, you work in all hours. So, I mean, there's a lot of different nuances of change that happen. Something that happens to a lot of people like my age and up is going from living your own life and being carefree to now becoming a caregiver, especially of an elderly parent.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of everyday change that people go through that we're just trying to muddle through or fight. And we need to not do that. But when your title, your whole persona, your role in life changes, it can feel like we've lost ourselves.
Yeah.
But the truth is that you're still you. Your essence is there, your values, your gifts, and everything else. Those are all still there. But now it's an opportunity to kind of like write a new story, and like what happened with me, to evolve to become the person that you are now meant to be.
Yeah. Obviously, life transition change is inevitable,
It
but
is.
it is like you mentioned, that essence and to your values and to your gifts. And one aspect that we can do that is having some inner flexibility. Be flexible with our mind, emotions, and even when our spirit it's out of whack. Because in
Yes.
reality, during the process of change, you're discovering new path, and you even start acknowledging when you're going through your process that you can change direction, change plans, redefine your goal, redefine yourself. And that's very important. Like you mentioned, be grounded to your values and
Yes.
especially when the circumstances get shaky. So it's
Yeah.
very important, that portion. So I love that you said that in those transitions. I've been in most of them and continue
Me
going
too.
through. Yeah.
It's funny because both of us talked about how we're very intentional. And so most of the changes that have happened in our life have been something that's been kind of planned, or something we've at least thought about. And so we go into it very logically. But there have also been times when our logic has failed us, and that we haven't necessarily been able to just use our brains to get through it,
Yes.
And when that happens, it's time to maybe trust yourself. So if you ever have a little voice inside of you that's like intuition, it's telling us kind of what direction to go. I mean, for myself, and I know for yourself, that
Yeah.
for us, we believe it's God. It's, the
Yeah.
Holy Spirit guiding us to where we need to be. But for some people, it's, a different faith or a spirit or something else. But whatever you call it, it's this deeper knowing that guides us, and when you're in a season of change, that, it's nice to lean on your spiritual practices. Sometimes you have to let the logic go and let faith lead you. And you can use,
Yep.
prayer, which has gotten me through a ton, meditation, which I wish
Yep.
I could do. I don't have the patience to meditate. I've tried numerous times. It just frustrates me. But for some people, it is their go-to. Use scripture, time in nature. That's one of my favorite things too, because those quiet moments can really anchor you and get you refocused.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important sometimes to not overthink everything. So
It's I can tell you, for me, it's a little hard. It is a little challenging in terms of because of I'm more logical in the way that I function. So, but by saying so, there's moment that logic doesn't necessarily take me, and I have to let go and yeah, God, you're in
let God,
control.
let go, let God.
Yeah, definitely. And I think if I can tell, it works better when I let him go and let him on control. But it's my faith.
Always.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah.
When earlier I was talking about how, we go through these changes, and like for myself, when I went through divorce, that you think, okay, it's divorce is the change. And it's just kind of like the umbrella of change. Any change that we go through, like I said, has so many parts. When I was going through divorce, I went through the change of no longer being married, to not having a partner for my children, to leaving my home. My ex-husband was military, so he stayed living on base, and I moved off base with the kids. The financial change was enormous. And that's actually one of the things that led me to being a financial coach, is because I went from being a stay-at-home mom to working 3 jobs trying to scrape by. And I know the struggles and the pain that go with that. And I had to do it the hard way. And so it was really important to me when I became a financial coach to really work with people that are going through all these changes that affect them. So it's going to be really important to keep in mind when you're going through some sort of big change, that there's going to be multiple levels to that. And so anytime you think that you're over one change and adjusting, don't be surprised if another piece of change comes into your life affiliated with the overall arcing big change that you're going through.
Yeah. I'm so glad that you shared this, because it's important to understand that not everything in change feels good.
Nope.
No, not at all. When I left my country, I gained new opportunities, yes. But I experienced so much pain, and because of the distance with the people that I loved, that I still love, obviously. And that emotional weight is real and it's heavy.
It is.
Yeah, so navigating change often requires a constant evaluation between cost and reward, because in the middle of the chaos, it's so hard to see the reward portion.
Oh yeah.
And that's overwhelming. Sometimes it's difficult to keep perspective. And that's when the support system comes along. That's when your daily habits comes along. Because sometimes you have those battles in your brain and emotionally, and that support system helps you to keep focus. And also those habits that you can put in place, it helps you to maintain your focus. So we have to, in that process of change, when it gets difficult, is exactly the moment when we're becoming and when we're building ourselves. And it's hard to see, like I mentioned, but it's important that we have that perspective in mind.
I really like that you talked about the habit part, and I didn't realize until we started having this conversation how important those habits would be. I mean, when I look back at it, I do recall that I leaned on a lot of the habits that I already had in place to get me through, because it does keep us in the familiar in some sense. So
yeah, I didn't see it that way, but it's true. It keeps us in the familiarity.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
This is a heavy topic, really.
It really is. It really is. But I love it. I think it's necessary, because we all go through change, like I said, and people are going through it constantly, even against their will. So, but I want to leave everybody with something. And I want to remind everybody that change isn't a detour. It's not a way around something. Okay. Yeah. It's generally the path to becoming who you are actually meant to be. And sometimes we fight that.
Yep.
You know, and you have to remember that you're not going to have all the answers right now, today, or at the moment. You know, sometimes you just need to be honest about what's happening to you, what's shifting, what's changing, then just take that one step at a time. And I know you said it a minute ago, and then we say it all the time, is, you know, one step at a time, and then celebrate your small changes, your small step forward, thing like that. It's what's going to keep you going. So I actually want to challenge everybody a little bit today. I want you to take just a couple minutes, and there's a couple of questions I want you to ask yourself. And that is, you know, if you're feeling like you're in chaos, which most of us do a lot of times, stop and just ask yourself, what change am I actually currently navigating? Because a lot of times we don't think about it. We just do it and go through it.
Yep.
And then think about, what is it that you're resisting? You know, like you were talking about, we don't stop and think about the grief, the mourning of the loss, even if it's a good thing. Like if you're having a baby and you've wanted a baby for a long time, you're still part of you is going to grieve your loss of freedom.
Yep.
Because once you have a child, there's not a lot of it.
Yeah.
So, you know, and when you can start to really put a name on those things, it really helps. And then ask yourself, what would it look like if you decided to just kind of go with the flow and let it happen, instead of fighting it and being resistant to it?
Yes. Yeah. And like I mentioned before, one thing that I would add, it's what I'm learning from this. Yes. Because in that process of becoming, and that's why sometimes, for example, journaling is good, because you can go back in that process of becoming. There's a lot of lessons that you're getting that the only way that you're not going back to a transition similar like that if you learn the lesson. So I think
Yep.
that's really good. I think people will take this challenge.
I hope so.
Yeah, I hope so. So I just wanted to mention, if you just don't forget, if you understand that this episode is good, please don't do this alone.
Yes.
We have our social media, we have our platform that we're here to support you. Our slogan is grow with us. And many of these episodes are things that we are transitioning and in the process of also becoming. So don't think that you're alone in this process. This is our community, and we're
Mhm.
creating it so we can support you and we support each other.
Exactly. And when we started this whole thing, kind of our tagline, I guess you could call it, was grow with us. And that's
Yes.
exactly what's happening. We are growing through all of this, and we want to help you guys grow through it too. So I also want to thank everybody for listening to this episode of Find Your Wise podcast. If you like this episode, please share it with a friend, and make sure that you hit the like button so that we can get out into the algorithm more, subscribe, leave a comment, all those things, so that other people can find our message a little bit easier. So until next week, make sure to be kind to yourself and stay open, and then choose your version of wise. Bye,
Yes.
everybody.
Bye-bye.